Today I'm going to show you how to make an awesome glow effect in Photoshop. Hey there, welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace. Today we're going to start off by darkening this image and then creating a light source and then drawing that light source interacting with our subject. And we're including a sample PSD as well as a special Photoshop brush for free with this tutorial. Just follow the link in the description right down below. We got a great tutorial. Let's go ahead and jump in. So here's our sample image. We've got a person doing yoga. I thought, hey, it might be fun to add like a glowing circle of energy around that person. So we want to add a light source, so the whole image has to get a little bit darker. So we're going to do that with levels. So we're going to go to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer, and then over to Levels. There we go. Now, when we have our levels, I just want to take my brights and we're just going to kind of pull these down right to about there. We're going to fine tune this in just a little bit, but we're just basically making this a lot darker. Next, we want to make our energy field. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a shape tool. We're going to go to our shape tools here on the left, and I'm going to go to my ellipse tool. There we go. Now with my ellipse tool selected, I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to hold shift to make sure we have a perfect circle. And there we go. Right around, looks good. I'm going to go ahead and let go. Now we have some options on how we'd like to fill this circle in. The fill, I'm just going to set this to none here. And then the stroke, we're going to set this to a color. I'm just going to use like a bright green color here, and then we're just going to increase the width. I'm going to hit Control or Command H to simply hide my selection real quick. That way I can actually see the width of this circle here. There we go. That looks pretty good. Let's make a really small one, and I'm going to hit Control or Command J to duplicate this layer. There we go. And then we're going to make another one that's a little bit bigger. Fantastic. That looks pretty good there. Now, with these shapes, I want them to kind of look like they're actually glowing. So I need a little bit of like blur to the shapes. So what we're going to go ahead and do is duplicate these shapes and then just add a Gaussian blur. It's the easiest way to do it. So let's go ahead and start off here. We'll zoom into our image here. This shape here, this is with our shape tool. So I don't want to go ahead and start working on this. Let's make a duplicate of it, and then I can rasterize that duplication. So let's hit Control or Command J to duplicate that. We'll just bring it to the top. We're going to right click and go to Rasterize Layer. Okay, that just makes it into a regular layer. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to change our blend mode from normal down to screen. There we go. And I'm going to hit Control or Command J to duplicate that. And then we're just going to go to Filter, and then we're going to go to Blur and then Gaussian Blur. And as you can see, I have a keyboard shortcut set up for Gaussian blur, Shift Option Control G. So that's what I'm going to be doing from here on out. There we go, Gaussian blur. And then you can just basically choose your blur. Now, of course, you could set this to a smart object if you wanted, but I'm going to be making a bunch of these. So I just want to go this as quick as possible. So I'm going to hit Control Command J again, and then we're just going to give that a little bit more of a blur. All right, Control Command J again, and a little bit more of a blur. There we go. And let's just do the same thing. So again, I'm just duplicating and then blurring, duplicating and then blurring. That's basically all we're doing. And that just creates a little bit like more effect. So you can see if I make some of these invisible, you kind of see the blur effect is kind of going away. And then here's my original layer, and this is going to get a little bit of a blur on it too. We just don't want it to be so perfect, right? There we go. Cool. Now, I really like how this looks so far. I do want to just add, let's go ahead and group all those together. So I'm just going to shift click all those and hit Control or Command G. There we go. Now you remember we made this thicker shape here. Let's go ahead and add some blurs there. So let's duplicate that. I like keeping my original ellipses there so I can work with them, but basically we're working with duplicates of the shapes. So let's go ahead and rasterize this duplicate now. Okay, and then this one is going to get a nice big blur on it too. There we go. We'll do one right about there. That looks pretty good. Let's be sure to change our blend mode from normal down to screen, and then another one. So Control or Command J, and then we'll just do a nice big blur on that one too. I find that kind of like the more levels of duplication and blur you do, that like kind of the more real the effect tends to look. So let's go ahead and group all those together as well. All right. Now, here in my original group, let's just scroll down. Don't forget, you guys can download the PSD of this entire process. So if you're looking at this and you're like, this is getting a little complicated already, don't worry. You can download the PSD and kind of go through everything step by step and see what we've done. Basically, we're just duplicating the circle a bunch and blurring it. Okay, So here is our original shape. I just want to use my brush tool, and we're going to add a layer mask. I'm going to paint black at like 20% flow in some areas, and that's just going to make this thing like not perfect, right? Like, you know, in here it looks kind of like faded away. Here it looks a little bit stronger. I just don't want it to be like absolutely, you know, absolutely the same. So here's turning that layer mask off and on. You can see it's just a subtle difference, but it kind of helps just give it a little bit more of an organic feel. All right, so that's our entire thing. I'm gonna group those both together, and then guess what? I can just hit Controller Command J on everything. I'm gonna hit Controller Command E to merge that together, and then we can start playing around here. You can go with different things. You know what? The cool thing here is I can even colorize this if I wanted to. I can add, ooh, this dissolve is kind of cool. I actually really like that dissolve. It's something that I don't get to use very often in Photoshop, but dissolve looks super cool. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna stick with this dissolve, but I actually don't want the layer to be, I want this effect, but I don't want the layer to actually be set to dissolve. Because once it's set to dissolve, if I, for instance, you know, add a layer mask and things like that, it starts to behave a little bit weird, and like really up close, it's just a bunch of squares. So I want to refine that dissolve just a little bit. So if you ever have an effect that you're like, I like that dissolve effect, but I want a little more control, here's a good way to solve that. What we're gonna do is add a solid color fill layer right underneath it. There you go. And then here's a real good visualization of just the dissolve. So next I just need to be able to select the color range of the dissolve. So I'm just gonna create a new layer. We'll go to select and then down to color range. There we go. And I'm just gonna click here right on my circle, and then we'll just bring up our fuzziness. You can see the white area gets selected. So that's basically what's gets selected with the dissolve. And then on a new layer, check this out. I'm gonna hit Shift Delete, and we're just gonna fill this with my foreground color, which is that same blue color. All right, and then Controller Command D to deselect. And then all these layers, I'm just gonna delete them because we don't need them anymore. So now, check this out. I have this layer, which is basically the dissolve effect, right? Really cool, but it's on a regular normal layer. So basically I just put a black layer underneath it so it could stand off a little bit more, and then we just extracted this out with the selection. Pretty cool. So let's add a little bit of a Gaussian blur because it's got that Photoshoppy look right now. So we're just gonna add a tiny bit of a Gaussian blur, and that's just gonna help it look a little more organic. You can see there's the preview before and after. Makes a pretty big difference, I think. All right, and then let's just do one more of those, and I'm gonna hit Controller Command T. We'll just kind of scale this up. There we go. And then this is gonna get a little bit of a blur to it as well. There we go, a little bit more of a blur. All right, fantastic. I'm gonna scale it back down. I think that looked good. That was looking good. Okay, cool. Now, here's my original ellipse. I don't know if you guys remember it. Let's just go back. I'm gonna group all these together and just pull this down. There we go. And then here's our original ellipse. I'm just gonna set this from normal to screen, and then we're just gonna make this a really small ellipse. So let's go ahead and click here. I'm gonna hit U for my shape tools, and then we're just gonna lower the radius of that. There we go. Lower the stroke radius, rather. All right, there we go. Maybe let's increase this just a little bit. You can see I've got a lot of control here, even after the fact. All right, and that's looking pretty cool, I gotta say. I'm gonna take this entire group here, and I'm gonna duplicate that. So Controller Command J, Controller Command E, and that just will merge an entire group together. So basically now all that work that I did, you can see I just have it as one layer. And then we're just gonna set this, you can do all kinds of fun things like overlay and soft light and hard light. You can get all kinds of really cool effects here. In fact, this vivid light is really, really nice. I'm just gonna dull this down a little bit. So let's hit Controller Command U. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make this a little bit darker, okay? And then we're gonna bring up our saturation a little bit. There we go. Fantastic. Let's bring that a little bit darker. So you can see I'm kind of just working with these layers to create the glow effect that I want. And then I think our background's got to get a little bit darker. So let's just go ahead and double click on this curves adjustment layer. And I'm going to go to my red channel. We're going to start bringing down the reds in my background too. It's going to give the whole image just a little bit of this green type effect. And I think it just kind of helps it in general look a little bit more like we want. So it's coloring the image and we're making it darker. Because as you can see, this doesn't really work on a light image. You got to make your image a little bit darker. And better yet, just start off with a dark image. Okay, well, all this is looking really good, right? I'm super happy with all this. We don't need that to be visible, but everything else I'm like, all right, this is cool. That's our glow effect. So what we're gonna I'm just gonna double click and call this glow ring. There we go. And now all I need to do is kind of mask this out where our subject is visible. So I'm just gonna make that invisible real quick. Let's go ahead and turn this layer off. And I'm gonna do a select color range on this black part of our subject. So let's create a new layer here. We're gonna go to select and then down to color range. And then I'm just gonna click right here on our subject, right? Let's click on this little plus icon because I wanna make sure she gets selected. But basically I'm using this to select basically her shirt, right? The light areas get selected, the dark areas don't. So perfect. So her shirt is pretty well selected. Okay, and then now I have my glow ring active. So the shirt is selected. Look at this. The glow ring kind of like intersects the shirt like that. But because I have my selection active and I'm on my glow ring layer, all I have to do is click on my layer mask, okay? And it's gonna automatically load that into a selection. We can see it just did the opposite, okay? So if that ever happens, just click on your layer mask and hit Control Command I, and then you invert your layer mask, okay? Now I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask. We can see it's selected some of the stuff in my background, which we don't want. So I'm just gonna make sure to paint that white in my background, just so the glow ring is visible in the background. Okay, we don't wanna hide it there. I just wanna hide it over my subject shirt. I could have went ahead and manually like trace that out with a pen tool or something like that. But this was a lot easier to do, right? So just basically made a selection right there. All right, keep in mind I can change this stuff at any time. That's looking pretty cool already. So the next step is to start painting a little bit of light over our subject to help it integrate, right? Because if you've got a light source in your image, it interacts with everything that's in that image. So let's jump in. We're just gonna use the brush tool for this, super easy. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. I'm gonna hit B for my brush tool, and then we're just gonna sample this really nice bright color, like something like that. And then with our brush tool, okay, there we go. I'm just gonna start painting in, let's go ahead and grab our color there. We're just gonna start painting in right here, right around the edge. Okay, now here's the story. When it comes to painting anything like this in Photoshop, it's all about taking your time, right? And also this glow ring right here, it's on the top, right? So it's not really gonna be visible on the bottom right here, right? So you wanna kind of paint the top of these areas and leave the bottoms alone, right? Because that makes a little bit more sense, right? The tops get affected and the bottoms don't really, okay? And then here, the opposite's gonna be true, right? There we go. So we're gonna go ahead and paint that on the bottom. This color I'd like to be a little bit more saturated. There we go. And don't worry about doing like a perfect job here. This is not something where you have to get it like perfect, you know, from the very start. As you can see, I'm not doing a perfect job necessarily, but it's real easy. You can just hit E for the eraser tool and then just come back and erase away wherever you're like, ah, that doesn't look right. All right, there we go, looking really good. So this is one of those things where like, I'm super zoomed in here, okay? So I'm zoomed in to like 400%. There we go. So you want to do a pretty good job zoomed in. You want it to look good at like, you know, 200, 300, 400%, something like that. But then when you zoom back out to like 100%, you're going to see that like it's going to look really good. Even if you're like, oh, it doesn't look perfect zoomed in like this. When you zoom out, you're going to be like, oh, it's fine. Like here, I'll just zoom out. We can see just turning that off and on. All the little like mistakes and errors and things like that that I made, they all just kind of like blend in and it starts to really look good. There we go. So I'm just using a nice small brush here and we're just going to kind of start right around the edge. So there we go. And this is one of those things that just kind of requires a little bit of patience, and I think it's a really fun exercise because it gets you to kind of like think about light, right? Like, okay, there's a light beam right there. So like, obviously it's going to be really light close to it. And then it's going to kind of fade away. And then this bottom part is going to get lit up, right? And then that's going to kind of fade away. And then the bottom part gets lit up and that fades away. There we go. So we're just going to kind of paint this in here. And then it's going to get more intense, right? So I'm just using a regular brush tool here. And I've got my flow. There we go. You can use a lower flow if you want to do a build-up effect. There we go. So you can see I'm just kind of like letting this, there we go. Kind of like letting the light itself dictate where I paint around my subject. Now this is just round one. We're going to wind up doing a couple different rounds of this. There we go. And the more time you spend on this and the more intentionality you put on it, the better your end results are going to look, right? Pretty much everything in life. There we go. So, but right now I'm just kind of tracing right around the edge, not necessarily trying to make something absolutely perfect, but you can see, let's just turn that off and on. Already it makes a pretty big difference, right? There we go. Now, another like little hack that I have is sometimes I'm using a pressure sensitive tablet when I'm painting, and that really makes this sort of thing a lot easier. I do have to admit, if you're using a mouse or a trackpad, you can definitely do this. It just depends on like how like comfortable you are with the medium you're using. But one little trick that I like to do is I hit R for my rotate tool, and that allows me to rotate my canvas. You can see I can just rotate this around. And that allows me to paint at a more natural angle. So sometimes, you know, this is natural for me, but doing like this feels kind of unnatural. Maybe the same with you and your mouse or something like that. So I like to hit R for the rotate tool, and then it allows me to just kind of paint at a little bit more of a natural angle. There we go. And it just gives me a little bit more, more control, and I feel like I can do a bit of a better job. And then just hit R to bring it back, and you can hold Shift, and it'll pop it back up, right up to the top there. Okay, there we go. That looks pretty good. Okay, that's looking pretty good, I gotta say. So next thing we want to do is start with the hair, and it's a really simpler process here with the hair. We're just gonna make sure we make our brush a little bit smaller. Okay, and then I'm gonna paint where the hair is. Okay, just where the fringes are, and trying to keep in mind that this is like slightly behind my subject, right? So there we go. So some of the areas that might get hit by the light, that's where I'm gonna kind of focus on. Right? Like not in front of the face of the subject too much, but behind her face, that's where it's going to get hit. There we go. And I can kind of just like, you know, work with the existing hair. The other thing that I can do is I can just make all that invisible for now, and I can just try to select some of this hair. So I'm going to go to New Layer. I'm going to go to Select Color Range, and then I'm just going to go right here on the hair. Let's just kind of click on the hair, and I'm going to see if I can select some of this hair. That looks pretty good. So let's hit OK. I'm going to turn all this back on. There we go. I'm going to create a new layer, and then with my brush tool, let's just grab like this nice bright blue color. I'm going to hit Control Command H, and then look at this. I can just kind of like paint on this little outer strands of her hair, right? Because I just made it into a selection. So all this little bit of hair is just going to get kind of lit up, right? Pretty cool, huh? Again, E for the eraser tool if you do something you didn't like. There we go. There we go. That's looking good. And then B for the brush tool. I'm going to deselect, and then we're just going to go real small, just like the size of hair. You'd be surprised at like, you know, if you take your time and really do it, you can definitely paint something that looks like hair. Just kind of try to follow the existing hair that's there. And again, does this take a little bit of time? Definitely. As you can see, I'm just like individually painting hair, but it's something that like if you do well and you know kind of practice on it a little bit, it's like, man, you can really do some cool effects, and it doesn't take that long to do. And you can see I'm just kind of like painting highlights on the hair. Some of this was already existing hair, and you can kind of see I'm just kind of coming into it and adding my own, trying to kind of follow like the lines of the hair and stuff like that. Look at that. So all that we just did, we just painted all that hair. The next thing we want to do is just a general glow of this kind of color on my subject as well. And for this, we're going to use a little bit of help. We're going to use a tool called Blend If to have this show up in the highlights. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. I'm going to hit B for my brush tool, and we're just going to start painting this in here. There we go. I'm going to start on the darker surfaces. There we go. Like right around her arm. We'll do a little bit around her leg. There we go. Don't worry about getting everything perfect, by the way. That's what layer masks are for. All right. This is something that you don't have to get 100% right to begin with. You can always come back in and refine it. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and change this layer. We can try something like screen, which looks good. Okay, this just makes things lighter. And now I wanna have this only visible in the highlights. So let's go ahead and bring this up here. I'm gonna double click on my layer and we're gonna go into our layer style here. And here where you see blend if, I'm gonna go where it says underlying layer. Okay, and I want it to be invisible where the underlying layer is dark. So I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and click on this. You can see these little two tabs right here. If I hold Alt or Option and grab one out, you can see it kind of separates into two little tabs. So hold Alt or Option and then grab this tab on the right and kind of bring this from the left to the right. And as we can see, it does a really nice job, right? Let's hit OK. And it's like, oh, that already looks much better, right? So let's just here compare there's the before, and then this really helps us blend in, right? Now, I also remember we just painted the darker areas, so I don't want this to be visible where the underlying layer is light. So I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and drag it from the right-hand side as well, right? Because I only want it to be visible where the underlying layer is darker, okay? That's just gonna kind of help me with my blending a little bit, all right? And then all we have to do is just grab a layer mask and kind of mask this in there. There we go. Perfect. Again, we want to kind of mask out the front part of the arm where it wouldn't get much light on it. There we go. That's looking pretty good, right? So we got all that glow effect like pretty quickly. Could we spend more time and make that more accurate? For sure, you can spend as much time as you want. But the fact that we were able to do that in such a short period of time, I think is just really, really nice. All right, so that's the glow. Let's do the same thing with her hair and her face, but we're gonna do them separately. All right, so her hair, let's go ahead and paint that. There we go. And this, we can just change this from normal to like a soft light layer. We don't even have to go crazy. I don't even have to use blend if. I just want some of that color to be in her hair, right? We'll just use a layer mask here and then like layer mask out like underneath, you know, there we go, underneath like folds of hair where the light wouldn't hit as much, right? There we go. So here's before and after that layer mask. Next, let's go ahead and do another one of these just with our brush tool over my subject's face. There we go. We're going to change this from normal to soft light as well. There we are. And then once we're over top of our subject's face, I just want this to be visible in the lighter areas. So let's double click here. With my blend if, we're gonna hold Alt or Option and then click and drag from the left to the right. This is gonna hide it in the darker areas and it's gonna have it only be visible in the light areas. Okay, so just the highlights really. Let's try screen. I think it's gonna look a little bit better. There we go. Fantastic. And then we'll just put a layer mask on this and paint this like right here. And then I want to do another layer of this, so let's hit B for the brush tool. And I'm just using the same color over and over again. There we go. Let's do an overlay on this one. As you can see, I'm just using the same color over and over again, just this green color here. And now we're painting with overlay here on our subject's forehead and really anywhere that's kind of hit the light. There we go. And I want to double click here again and hold Alt or Option to say don't be visible in the darker areas because I really just want it to show up in the light, right? She's already got light on her face. I just need to change the color of that light. Pretty cool. I think this is looking really nice. Let's just make a new layer. I'm going to put this to soft light. Just do a little bit of a glow right here. Let's try screen. There we go. Double click on this. Alt or Option, make it not visible in the darker areas. There we go. And then I'll just put a layer mask on this. And as you can imagine, you could spend all day doing this if you wanted to. But we really don't need to because it already looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and group all of those together and check this out. This is our glow effect on our subject, right? So this is our first one where we just painted like the really strong highlights. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to duplicate this whole thing, Control-Command-J, and then hit Control-Command-E to merge it all back together again, okay? And then this layer, we're just going to set this to something like a soft light, and then I'm going to apply a blur. So we're just going to do a little Gaussian blur to it. There we go. I'm going to put this back to screen. I think I want it to be a little bit more visible. There we go. So you can see I'm just added a little blur. I want even one more. So one more duplicate and then one more blur. Okay, so we went from this, we'll just show you right down here. And I didn't even do a perfect job. We're actually going pretty quick, but you can see once I zoom out to 100%, you can't really see that I didn't do a perfect job. Okay, so I just added one more layer of glow and then even one more, okay? There we go. Let's go ahead and save this out because we've done a bunch of work up until now. So let's go ahead and hit save this out. And by the way, I do want to mention here, check it out. Let's hit save. You can download this PSD on Phlearn.com for free. Just follow the link right down below. You can open up all these layers. You can even change all these colors if you wanted to. You can have a lot of fun with it. All right, so that all looks pretty good. And then we added this glow around our subject, and already I think we're looking really nice. So all of this together, you can see all of these little effects, they just start to add up. And that's the fun thing about these glow and light effects. So the next thing I want to do is add a little bit more color on the ground. So we have our glow ring, right? The whole group is this glow ring. I'm gonna hit Control-Command-J to duplicate that glow ring. And let's just take the layer mask and throw that in the trash. Let's just hit delete, okay? I'm gonna hit Control-Command-T, and we're just gonna basically hold shift, and I'm gonna shrink this down again because I want it to be visible like in the grass and stuff, right? There we go. Because it should interact with the ground, right? All right, that looks pretty good. Now this entire group here, I'm just gonna hit Control-Command-E and merge that together. Okay, so this now I need it to be visible like in the grass and try to just be in the highlights as well. So first thing we're gonna do is go ahead and double click here to bring up our layer style. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option, and I don't want this to be visible in our shadows, right? Just the highlights, that's the important part. Okay, there we go. That looks pretty good. And all in all, I say that looks relatively good. Let's duplicate this layer because I want to come back for another round. But here, this in the foreground here, this area should be less visible than in the background, right? So we're just gonna add a layer mask to that. And then I'm gonna just paint black with my layer mask like right here. And so it's like, that's, hey, not as visible anymore. And then of course, we just want to layer mask it away from like our actual subject, right? There we go, because we don't want it to be visible there. Okay, and then I have this other version. This is going to be in just the background there. Okay, there we go. And then this whole layer is going to get a blur on it because it shouldn't. It's just a glow of light, right? It shouldn't actually be that well defined. There we go. Okay, so this layer here. Now I'm going to just create a black layer mask on this, and we're just going to make this visible just here in the grass down there. And, you know, something like that. All right, try to do a little shadow for her. And then double click here. And then I'm just going to make it not as visible in the dark areas there. All right, that's looking pretty good there. Let's just shift click this layer mask. I think maybe bring a little bit, of that back in there. And there we go. Just doing a little bit of refinement to make sure that this looks good because it looks okay. It looks totally okay. Let's go ahead and just lower our opacity. Oh, it's set to a normal blend mode. Of course it doesn't look that good. I'm like, why doesn't this look good? Oh, that's why. Let's change this from normal. We're gonna go to soft light for now, and then I can make it a lot more visible. I'm like, why does that not look good? Oh, it's set to a normal blend mode. Duh. All right, this is gonna get a little bit of a blur to it too. And then this one, let's set this to like a color dodge. There we go. And double click on this. So, hey, you always remember your blend modes. They're really helpful. Let's hit OK on that. This is gonna get a little bit more of a blur because it's just like, it's the glow of light, right? It's the glow of light. Fantastic. All right. And then that's just like way too visible there. Here we go. So we have a glow of light. And you know what? These both need to be blurred even more. It's not blurry enough. So just go to the layer. You can go to filter and then blur and then Gaussian blur. I just have a keyboard shortcut set up for it. That's going to help it make it just a little bit faster, basically. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's hit Control-Command-J on that twice, and then I'm going to group those together. And then I'm going to put a black layer mask on that. And then I'm just going to make that visible just like right here. You know, just like right under the light itself. Cool. And then let's just lower that opacity and we're going to look really pretty good. Let's go ahead and group all those things together. And then I'm just going to put a layer mask on that. And then just with a small brush, I'm just going to paint black like this in kind of like a random pattern because it's just a little bit too perfect looking, honestly. I want it to look like it's hitting individual blades of grass, which the blend diff kind of like helps with that, but I need to interrupt it. So here's before and after that layer mask. And you can see that's what I painted on the layer mask. It's like really not my best artistic work, but it totally gets the job done, right? It makes it look a lot more real. This looks just kind of fuzzy, and here we go. That looks a lot better. Okay, well, we're not done yet. I want to add a little bit of like a sparkly glow kind of around all of this stuff. So here's how we're doing it. And this, we're going to create a custom brush, by the way, and then we're going to include this custom brush in your download. So just click on the link down below. So we're going to create a new layer. I'm going to hit B for my brush tool. Okay, again, I just want to sample this nice bright color here. So we're just going to paint with this. We're going to go to Window and then down to Brush Settings. Okay, and then here in our Shape Dynamics, I'm going to turn our Size Jitter all the way up. Okay, we're going to turn the control off. So you don't need a pen tablet to do this. Our brush tip shape, we're going to bring our spacing all the way up and our hardness up like that. Okay, I'm going to go with scattering. We're going to do both axes as we're going to turn that all the way up. Okay, and then we're just going to turn off transfer. So basically, there we go. We just have these little dots. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. All right, there we go. And I'm just testing this out right now. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So they're scattered apart, they're spaced apart. That looks pretty good. So let's just see if we like this, and then I'll save it, and then you can download it. All right. So now with our brush tool, I'm just going to kind of do some small little dots right here around our little particle thing. Just the more kind of like natural or like random bits of stuff you can do is just going to make these effects look not as like, you know, hey, he hit the glow button in Photoshop, right? It's like, oh, cool. That kind of has like a little bit of a natural effect to it. There we go. That looks pretty good. Let's make another one, and then I'm just going to use a bigger brush, and then we'll just do a couple, like, it's too big of a brush. There we go. Just a couple of these little big particles here. Little big particles, hey. Next thing I want to do, the particles I think actually look pretty cool. Next thing we're going to do is I'm just going to double click on this layer and we're going to go to an outer glow. So we're going to go ahead and add an outer glow to these. Our blending mode is going to be screen, and then our color, let's just make like a really nice bright color. And then here you can see the preview turn off and on. Okay, and then we can kind of just change our size here too. There we go. Nice, soft, little outer glow to it. And then you can see I can just turn this off and on, and adds a little bit glow. I can hold Alt or Option and click and drag this from one layer to another one. And look, those little particles have a nice outer glow to them too now. Okay, so that looks really good. And I'm pretty happy with this brush. I think it did a nice job. So let's go ahead and save it out. We're going to go to Window and then down to Brushes. I'm still on the same brush, right? Like if I paint around, you can still see it. It makes more of an effect, which is kind of fun. I can just make a tiny, tiny brush and just do a little bit more around here. Why not? I'm having fun with it. May as well just add more of these little things. Okay, fantastic. So now that I have this brush, we're good to go. Let's go ahead and save it out. So B for the brush tool, just right click, and then go to your little settings icon here, and then we're just gonna go to New Brush Preset, okay? And then we're just gonna call this Phlearn Energy Sparkle. There we go. And we don't need to capture the brush size in this, so it'll work with any brush size. Perfect. And then you can see I can just click on that brush anytime, and I've got my effect, which is really, really nice. Okay, now we're almost done with this. I just want to do a little bit of color balance work here at the end. So let's just go ahead and zoom out. I think it looks pretty cool, right? We're just going to grab an adjustment layer. I'm going to go to our color balance. Here we go. Color balance adjustment layer. And then let's just take our highlight color. We'll bring that more towards cyan, a little bit more towards green. Let's go to our shadow color and maybe push the, I'm just kind of gonna move these and see what looks good. I wish I had better advice for coloring in stuff like this other than move it and see what looks good, but honestly, that's what I do, and that's what most people I know do also. So if you're in that camp of like, I just move it to where I like it, don't stress out, because most people do that. There we go. Now I'm gonna take all of these layers where I did all of this glow stuff. We're gonna move this all together. By the way, when you download the PSD of this, it's gonna be a lot cleaner. I'm gonna clean it up for you guys, so it's not gonna be as messy. But look at all this, we just drew all that. Now I'm gonna hit Control or Command J to duplicate that entire thing. So all this is gonna get a duplicate. Let's just turn our color off for right now. And then I'm just gonna hit Control or Command E. Okay, so all of our original is there, but I just added all this. And then this, I'm just gonna change it to a soft light adjustment layer, and then we're just gonna give it a nice glow, or blur rather, nice blur. So let's go to a Gaussian blur, and there we go. Ooh, that's looking cool. And then let's just go ahead and double click and tell it not to be visible in the darker area, so it's just visible in the light. Okay, again, I did all that cool glow stuff. I might as well just kind of enhance this glow while we're at it. And there we go. So that looks pretty cool. And then if you wanted, of course, you can just hit Control or Command J and duplicate this. You could even, you know, have this one be even less visible in the dark areas. There we go. Cool. And then you can go in, you know, if you want this sort of thing, like if you like it in some places, let's just group those together. Again, you can see I'm kind of just doing the same thing over and over again, if you hadn't noticed already. But let's just make this visible and invisible, and then you can see like, hey, where do you like this? Just use the layer mask. So let's hold Alt or Option, click on our layer mask. That's just gonna make a black layer mask. I'm just gonna go to grab a regular brush now, and we're just gonna paint this in like little areas that I like. Like I thought it looked good right there. Thought it was kind of cool right there. Her hair obviously looked good. Her hair looked good. You can hit Shift and click on your layer mask to see the before and after, to see like, you know, where you might want to paint this in. Her hair right there looked pretty cool. Her arm. So I'm just painting this back in, right? You don't have to have these visible everywhere. It can literally just be like wherever you think it works. Here we go. Cool. And then I'll just paint like, you know, I'll make it like stronger over there and stronger over there and stuff like that. See how this adds a little bit more like randomness to the energy field or whatever you want to call it around her. It's that sort of thing that'll just help this effect look a little bit more realistic. All right, and there we have it. Man, I'm super happy with how this effect turned out. So let's take a look at our before and our after. Thanks so much for watching, Phlearn. I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget, you can download all this stuff, the brush, the sample image, and the PSD on Phlearn.com. Just follow the link right down below. Hit that subscribe button. We'll send you a free tutorial every single week. My best. Much love from me to you. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone.